week, Tiff Needell watches a famous British name return to the racetrack. Janet Trewin asked just how safe are the most popular cars in Britain. And Jeremy Clarkson returns to his beloved American muscle cars.
Getting yourself noticed here on the King's Road in Chelsea is nigh on impossible. You can have a stupid haircut like mine and no one will bat an eyelid because just down the road they sell one equally daft. You can even go for a silly sandwich board. No one will look twice. You can even have the stupid haircut and the sandwich board and talk to a camera and no one will pay a blind bit of attention. No, if you want to get noticed on the King's Road, you have to go...
These days, people will put up with great discomfort, go to great expense, and as often as not make utter fools of themselves if it means they can stand out in a crowd. It's always been hard thinking of new ways to do this until, as they say on Tomorrow's World, this device came along. Designed by Gordon Murray, whose past credits include a couple of World Championship-winning Formula One cars, and ex-racer Chris Craft, it's built by the Light Car Company and it's called the Rocket.
Now it may look like a toy, but it does 0 to 60 in 4 seconds and it costs £38,000. So it isn't one. What it does is it merges the style of a Grand Prix car from the 50s with ultra-light space-age materials. What it is just about the most accomplished head-turner I've ever driven. I love it!
The trouble with today's supercars is they all look pretty much the same if you squint a bit. Well, you'd have to squint rather more than a bit to make this look like anything, really. What we have here is a cross between a motorcycle, a racing car, and a thing.
The end result is certainly undiluted by creature comforts. Never mind no stereo. It doesn't even have a roof or windows. And the boot is completely full because I've got a Mars bar in it. I can't remember laughing just from driving a car ever before. This is paradise.
It's also the Rocket at its best. It's like walking down the road flanked by Princess Diana on one side and George Michael on the other.
The trouble with Clarkson is he thinks this is just for a cruise. This is a serious motor car. It should be out on the open road. Early morning, no traffic, weak spring sunshine, and the countryside just starting to come alive. No need to jostle with other motorists. The simple, pure joy of driving an open car in the open air. While the wind rushed through my hair, I was snug and warm in the draft-free cocoon of the Rocket. But of course, the only place to really test a car like this is on a racetrack. And there could be no more appropriate track than Goodwood. Now more airfield than racing circuit, it's still an ideal location for testing. Smooth, high-speed corners where the Grand Prix stars of the 50s and 60s learned their trade in Connaughts, BRMs, Lotuses, Coopers and tiny Formula 3 machines. The style of the Rocket is indeed much like the 1962 Lotus of Stirling Moss that left the circuit on this long right-hander and ended his famous career. But the sweeps of Goodwood are still a perfect test of a car's suspension and its ultimate cornering performance. Just like those Formula 3 cars of the 50s, the Rocket is powered by a motorcycle engine. But instead of a single-cylinder 500cc unit, we've got a 4-cylinder 1000cc Yamaha engine, using its own 5-speed gearbox and a chain drive to the special differential, which incorporates both low and high ratio. The cockpit is much larger than a racing car. There's even room for someone to sit behind you if you can find a volunteer. But otherwise, the layout is just like the real thing. A bucket seat, racing steering wheel, and a right-hand gear change. With 12,000 revs on offer, the Rocket just begs to be driven fast. On the open road, it will idle along in high ratio, happily pulling just 4,000 at 70 miles an hour. On track, it's low ratio and high revs all the way. With 143 horsepower, it has the same sort of power as a 16-valve Golf GTI, but in a chassis that's only about a third of the weight. Indeed, the power-to-weight ratio of the rocket is not far short of that of an F40 Ferrari. The handling is what you'd expect from a designer like Gordon Murray. Bumps absorbed with ease and corners taken with confidence. The rocket really has no vices. Light, positive rack and pinion steering gives all the feedback you need, and when the limit is reached, it's easily corrected. Gear changes are equally satisfying as the lever is pushed either forwards or backwards to engage the next ratio. I could have played all day, but our circuit time was soon gone, and it was time to give back our expensive toy.
Brilliant. Jeremy gave it 10 out of 10 for posing. I've got to give it 10 out of 10 for driver satisfaction. You have to admit, it only gets 2 out of 10 for practicality.
There's a special kind of ambience about a new car showroom. Everything's super bright and clean and shiny. No room here for nasty thoughts about congestion or pollution or rust. But buying a new car is an important decision for everybody. And these are just the kinds of searching questions that need to be asked right here and right at the beginning. For instance, what about safety? Volvo, of course, are well known for promoting the safety of their cars, and yet they don't feature amongst the top 10 most popular models sold in Britain last year, nor, for that matter, do Volkswagen, despite the safe image of their Golf. So clearly, safety is not an overriding consideration. These are examples of those 10 most popular models. Together they account for just about half of all the cars sold in Britain last year. So clearly their design will have a major influence on road safety in years ahead. But how do you tell just how safe any of them are? The first thing to do is to look at the brochure, and it's quite encouraging to see these days just how much space the manufacturers devote to the safety issue. But then they are trying to sell you the thing, and perhaps their analysis isn't quite as objective and maybe even as reliable as you might hope. So what about making your own assessment? Well, there are a few obvious features that you can check for yourself. All-round visibility, for example, worse in some cars than in others, and not notably good in the normally safety-conscious Golf, as we've pointed out before on Top Gear. And then there's comfort. A comfortable seat ensures that you concentrate on the job in hand, so check the support and also the adjustments, particularly for height if you're a very short or perhaps a very tall person. The steering wheel too may adjust up or down, or sometimes even for reach. And then there's the seat belt. It's quite common these days to be able to adjust the top anchorage, but it's not always easy. Here in the Fiesta, it needs a spanner. And what about the layout of the controls and instruments? Well, it's not uncommon, even now, to find that they're masked by the steering wheel or maybe your hands on it, at least for some sizes of driver. And how many more times do we have to complain about low-mounted radios so that it's actually quite dangerous to adjust them whilst you're on the road? And none of these cars has the major controls on steering stalks up here as they do on many of the French cars. Well, that may all seem like pretty obvious stuff, but what about the hidden virtues of such things as the anti-lock braking system, for example? So let's start with ABS. It's not available on any Metro or Nova, but they're both pretty long in the tooth by now, and it's not available on some models of 6 of the rest of the top 10. It's an option on a varying proportion of the model ranges, all of Rover 200s, for example. And it's only fitted as standard on top of the range versions of the final 4 models. The price of the option varies from around £500 to nearly £1,000, a significant sum for all the cars. It's a lot less complicated when it comes to other safety features. Airbags, for example. None of these cars has one. On the brighter side, all the petrol injection models do have fuel cutout switches so that the petrol stops pumping in the event of an accident, and they all have their own approved child seats. But beyond that, the new Astra stands out. Vauxhall have taken the step forward of putting in side impact bars. Now, this is not a new idea, but how long it takes to catch on. None of the other cars has them. They've also installed a belt tensioning device to take up the slack, especially that which occurs down in the reel out of sight in the event of an accident. And it's also a system, by the way, that's been installed in the new Golf. Now, we understand that you'll have to wait till next year before both of these features are available on the new Escort, which came out just a year before the Astra. And similarly, we'll have to wait for new models before these features are available on any of the other top 10 cars. Now, all of this is very confusing if you're trying to weigh up the advantages and disadvantages of the very many different types of car just for safety, let alone for anything else. So what about an expert overall assessment of these factors? The last time Top Gear looked at this subject, 3.5 years ago, we drew attention to the Which Car Safety Index. 57 features were checked on all models tested and a single score allocated out of 12. When Which tested examples of these top 10 models, the scores varied from 3 for some Peugeot 205s to 8 for one Cavalier, and that's almost as high as any car has scored.
The index is the only way in which you, as a consumer, can check exactly what the manufacturers are saying. It's like a yardstick by which to measure each of the cars.
So what's been its impact, do you think?
Well, consumers have become more aware of safety. Manufacturers are starting to use it in their advertising, and we've seen quite significant leaps forward over the past few years in terms of what manufacturers are fitting to their cars now as standard.
The main limitation of the Which Safety Index, though, is that it's purely a visual inspection and doesn't involve any real accidents. But since that last Top Gear report, we've seen the publication of this. It's a detailed analysis from police data of all accidents broken down into the models involved. Now, this is the kind of information that's been published in other countries for many years, most notably in Sweden by the Folksam Insurance Group, but it's never been done before here. So how useful is it?
Well, it's definitely a step in the right direction, but there's still added complications when you try to separate out safety actually from the cars and the drivers themselves. For example, the Skoda Estelle comes out very well. Now that car's not driven very quickly, and so it's having more low-speed accidents, so that's probably why it comes out safer. So there are problems, but it's certainly a step in the right direction.
The trouble with these accident statistics is that they are inevitably historic, and they don't tell you anything about the brand new models, like, for example, the Escort or the Astra here. For them, you have to rely on crash testing. All new models have to pass certain statutory crash tests, head-on into a concrete wall. It's somewhat artificial, but it is repeatable and gives objective data. How far does the steering wheel move? Do the seats break off? Things like that. Of course, accidents more commonly occur with cars crashing into each other, as in the Auto Express Group's crash between an Astra and a Golf that we showed earlier this spring. It's more realistic, but less easy to analyse or compare. After all, Astras don't only crash into Golfs. The idea of an offset test, rather than one using the whole of the front of the car, is a good one, even when the car is run into a concrete wall rather than into another vehicle, which is what the Fast Lane Group did recently in their test on an Escort. The results were revealing. For instance, there was an underbonnet fire. Ford say they've never known such a fire happen before. But they have recently strengthened the dashboard area, which should reduce the steering wheel intrusion found here. The latest development is to try to improve the offset barrier test by mounting a deformable structure on the concrete block to mimic another vehicle, but in a repeatable fashion. The Transport and Road Research Laboratory are working on it, and it could yield more useful data for the design engineers. But it's important to recognise the scale of the problem that we're setting them. Recently, the Americans decided to increase the speed at which they crash test cars from 30 to 35 miles an hour. Now, that's just a 17% increase in speed, but thanks to the laws of physics, it works out at a 36% increase in the amount of energy that has to be dissipated without any increase in injury. If we then decide that the crash must take place using only half the car, then we're asking it to withstand an even more massive increase in energy. overall it would have to be 3 times as effective as current EC law demands. Now, no engineer is going to turn around and say it can't be done, but it will take some ingenuity and it may be expensive. So will they do it? Well, if it's put into law, yes. If not, maybe. Let's take one simple example of a safety design feature that we've become quite familiar with here on Top Gear, the steering wheel. 4 years ago, we showed you this design by the Transport and Road Research Laboratory as an improvement to the original Metro steering wheel. This one's got more padding and it's got a round metal bar at the rim instead of this narrow metal strip on the edge. All of this, of course, is designed to reduce injury in the event of an accident. So how do the top 10 most popular cars in Britain compare to this simple safety ideal? This is part of the Which Safety Rating, so we've asked their expert, Dr. Steve Rattenbury, to examine each of these cars and rate them for safety. None of them reached the TRRL standard, and there was a wide range of effectiveness, from the best in the Astra and Cavalier to the worst in the Peugeot 205. The point really is this. The research into steering wheels was published years ago, and good, safe design need be no more expensive and need look no worse than any other kind of design. And it can be incorporated into a model at any point in its life. They don't have to wait for years before they build it in. So if we really want the very best of safety in our cars, as well as all the other desirable improvements, then ask a few pertinent questions next time you go to a new car showroom.
Early morning and avoiding the glare of public eyes at the British Aerospace factory near Preston, a new British sports racing car is rolled out for its very first test. Months of work and worry come to fruition in a bold attempt to revive the fortunes of one of the most famous names in British motorsport, BRM.
It's just 3 weeks to go to the start of the World Sports Car Championship at Monza in Italy. The BRM has yet to turn a wheel in anger, and it faces the challenge of following in the footsteps of current world champions Jaguar against the might of opposition from Peugeot, Toyota and Mazda. Will it be a return to the heydays of the 60s when they won the Formula One Constructors title with Graham Hill? Or is the team to face the same agony of the public development of their first Grand Prix car in the early 50s?
That very first BRM arrived late for its debut, made 4 laps in practice and then broke a drive shaft at the start of the race. A regulation change deprived the V16 machine of any chance of Grand Prix glory, and its 2.5-litre successor fared little better despite the talents of Stirling Moss. It was the arrival of Graham Hill and the new 1.5-litre formula that brought BRM its greatest success in the early 60s. They also turned their attention to sports cars and raced an experimental Rover gas turbine-powered machine at Le Mans in 1963 and 65, finishing on both occasions. But it was their Grand Prix wins that counted for most, and in 1962 they took both constructors' and drivers' title with Graham Hill at the wheel. Jackie Stewart started his Grand Prix career with the team, but really the greatest memories remain with the partnership of Hill and BRM. The last Grand Prix victory was to be scored by Jean-Pierre Beltoise in atrocious conditions at Monaco in 1972, but by then BRM was already in decline.
It's here, in the back streets of Congleton, Cheshire, that the revival of the BRM name is being coordinated behind the rather unprepossessing facade of a converted mill.
The mill is the base for John Mangaletsi's production of special high-performance manifolds, but his current project is of a different order of complexity. His designer, Paul Brown, was to use the latest high-tech computer-aided design and the most sophisticated of materials. Magnesium alloys for the castings of gearbox and uprights, and a Kevlar composite monocoque like current Grand Prix cars. BRM was always a thoroughbred manufacturer and so commissioned their own engine from Terry Hoyle Limited. A 3.5-litre V12 has been built with an output of around 630 horsepower. Reliability is crucial in endurance racing, so BRM have also turned to consulting engineers Ricardo to help avoid damaging heat stresses in the cylinder head. Last November, the major components came together for the first time in the Congleton workshop, At last it was possible to get a real feel for the layout of the complete car and try out the near central driving position under the eye of team manager Ian Dawson. Where's the column got to go below there, though?
Yeah.
To central. Just 5 days ago, we were at the BRM workshop in Congleton, looking at pieces of a racing car. Now, we're down in London at the Science Museum, and here is a complete BRM P351 Le Mans. This sort of public event is crucial in keeping the sponsors happy and attracting more finance. But basically, it's just a punctuation mark in the slow and difficult development process.
It seems a long time since that launch, but it's been 4 months of painstaking work, waiting for parts to be made and trying to put together a sponsorship package. Now comes the crunch.
Like every new racing car I have ever known, it was temperamental at the beginning. As the engineers searched for the problem, John Mangaletzi's vision was unblurred.
We wanted to bring BRM back as a strong racing force, and we've decided to go into sports car racing, and we're dedicated to racing worldwide in sports cars.
And the inspiration yourself that keeps you going?
It's a famous name which we have to do justice to start off with, and it's a project which is very exciting. We have a lot of support from a lot of industry people worldwide, and we want to go out there and do a good job for them all.
After hours of increasingly desperate struggle, the team resorted to the tow rope, with success. At last, the new BRM had come alive. A couple of blasts up and down the dirty runway by Ian Dawson, and it was time for driver Harry Toivonen to have a go. By now, a flat battery combined with the faulty throttle potentiometer that caused the starting problem meant little useful could be learnt, but at least the BRM had turned a wheel for the first time. 6 days later at Silverstone, Toivonen's co-driver Wayne Taylor had the chance to try the car at speed. The team will miss the first round at Monza, and instead the new BRM will make its own debut on May the 10th at Silverstone. Let's hope they have better luck than in 1950.
In 1955, Ford was against the ropes on the sports car front. Chevrolet was about to kick them to hell in a handcart with the Corvette, and the threat from Europe was a tough one. Their answer was the Thunderbird.
Well, she got her daddy's car and she cruised through the hamburger stand now. Seems she forgot all about the library like she told her old man now. And with the radio blasting goes cruising just as fast as she can now. And she'll have fun, fun, fun till her daddy takes the TV away. Fun, fun, till her daddy takes the TV.
The 55 is the first Ford Thunderbird. It was 292 cubic inch engine, 5 litres, power seats, power steering, power brakes, power windows, 3-speed manual with overdrive. The overdrive is automatic with a kick down. Develops about 200 brake horse, top speed of around 115 miles an hour, 0 to 60 about 10 seconds.
Good vibration. Good vibration.
The gold is a 66, which was the last of the famous mark, the 55 to 66. Has all sorts of gadgets, it's full of toys, it's the one I like the most. It's got a 428 cubic inch engine, which is 7 litres, 360 brake horse. And it's just lovely to look at and lovely to drive, and it's a great car. It's just fully loaded, it's got everything. And very easy car to drive. Fuel consumption on this a bit horrendous, but around 12 to the gallon. They're becoming dinosaurs now with the legislations, but they'll just never build anything again like them. So we must keep them what fuel left.
We always take my car, 'cause it's never been beat, and we've never missed yet with the girls we meet. None of the guys go steady, 'cause it wouldn't be right to leave your best girl home on a Saturday night. I get around.
We're really a bunch of enthusiasts that just really enjoy driving the cars. I drive them every weekend, and I should think I attend a show about every 2 weeks. We're not there particularly to win trophies, just to meet the public and introduce them to the cars, and generally have a good time.
Watch the coming up Winslow down South Park Boulevard. It was looking good from tail to hood. Great big fins and painted steel.
Stealing the limelight was the early bird, the 55.
With my old man behind the wheel.
Then, of course, there was the square bird, or box bird as it's better known.
The man with the plan and the pocket comb.
And of course, you can't forget the gloriously titled Banana
And I could
Nose.
hear him saying, don't you give me no Buick.
Eventually, the last of the classic Thunderbirds ended up as a luxury cruiser, its place as the sporting Ford taken by the Orion Gear. Or was it the Mustang? Never too sure.
Well, this is a 1960 square bird. I bought it in, I would say, 4.5 to 5 years ago, off of a friend of mine who wanted to buy it back 4 days after I bought it off of him. I've had American cars basically all my life. I had a little break, went over to English, but I went back to American, and I'm still with them. My wife thinks it's wonderful, I think, because she always cleans and polishes it. I don't. I drive it. She loves it. We're going back to America in a week's time, and instead of bringing clothes home, we're bringing a wheel each home, and she's not very keen on that.
Rode in the rain and snow. The man and his machine.
This is a 1961 hardtop coupe. I've owned it for 6 years. It's powered by a 390 cubic inch engine, which develops 300 brake horsepower. I love the styling, the shape of the car. It's unique as opposed to today's plastic and rubber cars. Around town, you're getting about 9 to a gallon, and on the motorway, about 15 to 16. But then if you're worried about the fuel consumption, you'd never buy one. I just love it.
You can keep your Eldorado. And foreign cars absurd. Me, I wanna go down in a silver Thunderbird. Me, I wanna go down in a silver Thunderbird.
Well, there it is. Proof that Clarkson really does dream the American dream. Brute V8 horsepower with all the trimmings. Whereas I'm quite happy with the bare essentials, especially when it's the nearest thing you'll get to a racing car on the roads. That's all for tonight. Goodbye.
Next week in Top Gear, we test new coupes from BMW and Honda. We explore the delights of the American Rolls-Royce. And we go rallying in an RS 2000 on the Tour of Cornwall.